what the aim was meant to be was that I was meant to try and summarize things that had happened, and you'll be glad to know I'm not actually going to try and do that. And also to start helping us maybe make some directions forward from the conference. And in many ways, actually, Barry's session was very helpful because it's sort of very much linked to what we're going to do. So we might be able to pick up on some of those questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by not really giving you a full summary, but just highlight a couple of words and concepts and ideas that have come up. And then we're literally going to just go straight into some questions at the tables and just to be a discussion. So this is not going to be a talking session. I was also quite conscious that at this stage everyone would be quite tired. So I thought I'd put that up. Just to make you feel sorry for me, because these are the two people who are in charge of my life on two different countries. So I thought that would just get you thinking. So I'm just feeling sorry for myself, that's all. So, I just wanted, before jumping into the summary, just to remind you of what we said we were doing in this event, or what we thought we were doing. The first was to share existing research, look at the nexus between mental health and peace building, explore opportunities for collaboration, so various stuff's helpful there, and where the different the fields can be brought together successfully. So I think if we look at that, it's pretty clear that we've been sharing existing research, we've been talking about different programs, we've been sharing what different people have done. We've also had some conceptual presentations which have been talking about where the global field is at, where local issues are at. So I think we've been doing quite a lot of the first things. But really what we need to now be doing is maybe a little bit more concretely say, well, where is the nexus? We've heard lots of things, but where is the nexus between peace building and mental health? And really start, exactly as Barry began, what are the opportunities for collaboration and how could we more successfully bring these issues together? So I think we've sort of maybe done more of the first little bit than the second bit. So what we're hoping over the rest of the event is to focus on the rest of these issues. So this is my attempt to try and summarize what I have heard. So I think we started off on that end hearing a lot about why context matters, and we heard a lot in the beginning about international frameworks. Mike presented the ISAC guidelines talking about issues of the importance of basic security compared to different types of programs and the energies that we need to be putting into that. We just had another session talking about the fragmentation, issues of collaboration. I think internationally, the split between structural views of peace building versus people-to-people ideas of peace building, the different types of ways that psychosocial work is often integrated into that, which is very much in a programmatic way, running parallel. So we had quite a lot of discussions in that area. Then, that's a hippo for those of you who only know, only know about icebergs. So that's the hippo up there, and we had a lot of discussion about what is the problem we're dealing with. And we talked a lot about direct violence, the destroying of relationships, belonging, cultural violence, structural racism, right down to the land issues and the historical questions. So all of that sort of spectrum, we had lots of talk about all of that. We spoke a lot about violence becoming embedded in communities, linked into the everyday type of issues. I put up a picture there of the three little pigs running away from the scary wolf, who's already knocked down a straw house and a wooden house. And that's really to remind us, well, what are the different things that we're doing? And then we heard lots of presentations of what people are doing, and I can't really summarize all of those. But we heard about trauma interventions, sociotherapy interventions, narrative interventions. We heard about advocacy work, policy work, some sort of income generation work. People stressed the importance of education and peace education. Different psychosocial projects, theatre, art, storytelling. You called it compassionate conversations, I think Teresa said. Rehumanizing work, and I'm sure there were others. But over the course of the last 2 days, we've heard different examples of these types of issues. They seem to then be coming in and all these different levels. We had the discussion about leaders, vulnerable groups, is this the right way of conceptualizing people, families, young people, donors, men, women. Again, I'm not going to repeat all of that, but we were talking at all these different levels. And then this little thing kept coming up quite a lot, people saying this is personal, talking about their own experiences, the need to also look at your own organization. So there was some sort of self-reflexivity stuff that went on. This idea came up a lot of that, linking to what are we dealing with, that we're talking about really big issues across people's lives, across life journeys, not just in sort of isolated events, thinking back to the hippo over there. The issue of language came up quite a lot. Some people being very comfortable and saying concepts like trauma were helpful to them. Other people saying that really wasn't a very helpful way, that it was too narrow, it changed the nature of how people talk about suffering. We had some other discussions on language, what do people mean by peacebuilding and other sorts of things, and Kumla made an intervention around the issue of language. It seemed a number of times I heard people talking about power in different levels. So that's really not a very good summary, but I didn't really want to go through all my notes and say this is what everybody said, but rather to just give you some visual sense of this is all the stuff that we did. But equally, before we move on to the next bit, are there any other words or things people think we should have up there that maybe...
Intergenerational.
Intergenerational, okay, so we put that there. Yeah.
Global.
Global? Someone writing these down and then I'll stick them on there afterwards, yeah. Other words?
Healing mind, soul and body.
Sorry?
This healing.
Holistic.
Healing, yeah.
Soul, mind and the body.
And holistic, yeah, holistic ideas, yeah. There was a lot, yeah, and did you say soul? There was something.
Soul, mind and body.
Yeah.
If I have to say dignity.
Yeah, there was dignity, humiliation, there was a lot of, yeah. Yeah.
Transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I think acknowledgement is came up quite a few times.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's true. That would be one of those sort of listed over there, maybe. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that in my summary. So these were some of the things that people said, the issues that we maybe needed to look at was changing environments, using local resources, building resilience, dealing with identity issues, reconciliation in relationships, justice, impunity, forgiveness. Those were areas of intervention, I suppose, that came up.
Learning from...
Sorry?
Humility.
Humility. Yeah, Mike mentioned that right at the start and it ran through.
There's also been a theme for me, and I wouldn't know how to put it in there, about essential business, about who's in the room to speak about what.
Yeah.
And part of that is that people couldn't get visas.
Yeah.
So they kind of logistical and political and practical issues, but it links to the issue of power and who has voice.
Inclusion,
and
exclusion.
speaks to and about what.
Yeah, and also the insider-outsider things, the sort of intervention. I mean, when I used the 3 pigs, it was also about the intervention mentality, like who comes in and does what, and sort of insider-outsider.
The ownership.
Mm-hmm. Of what? You mean of programs?
Ownership.
Oh, sorry, I don't know why I didn't say it.
Ownership of programs, ownerships of the way forward. It was really a main theme throughout the process of who owns the agenda for the healing process.
The other thing that is standing out for me when I look at the blue of this is personal, is that this is personal but yet political. And I think the political nature of this hasn't been coming up very strong. We've been talking now about our work as a psychosocial work as apolitical. And maybe it has to do with the issues of power looking into ourselves, that we are getting into the political context with something that is personal.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? And I don't know how we also capture. And for me, that's what makes psychosocial work in Peacebuilding different from just generic psychosocial work or therapy, that we are working in a very political context with political issues. So it is not apolitical.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's an important point. And it was when I did my little presentation in the beginning, when I sort of talked about the paradigm shift in psychosocial, that's what I was meaning. The paradigm shift is to realize your project or program, your activity is part of the environment, and you are part of whatever politics are going on, whatever power is going on, you're a part of that. There should be some sort of link between these things. I mean, trying to do this on PowerPoint is really hard. It's really like squares and blocks.
When we talk about, or when there's discussion about multi-sectorals, as if psychosocial, peace, healing are the sectors, but if we go from your presentation to the beginning that hunger is one of our biggest issues, and we looked at the context people are coming from, the multi-sectoral as including other sectors, agriculture, water, basic income, and that as part of multi-sectoral. So the integrated development leg of this.
I think that's helpful because it's like who's collaborating with who. So I mean, we can end up just talking about psycho and social rather than the wider thing, which is not really being what people are saying. Yeah.
I wanted to kind of put in the word success, but also the word failure. I mean, I know we present our best foot forward, and that may help. But on the other hand, we may learn a lot more from failure. And of course, this kind of environment doesn't speak about failure necessarily, because I know that that's always also intellectually not the best way to approach it. But probably
It's like it's what I need here. Like how do we know what's working, what's not working, what do we learn? Other things. Yeah, Mike.
The word moral, I think, surfaced multiple times and actually played a fairly central role in our thinking about values, our own positioning, not causing unintended harm, part of reflective practice.
Yep.
I also think reparation came out.
Reparation.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah.
And
so it's
the
like
next-
with reparation, that sort of.
Yeah, not just economic, financial, but
Yeah.
also like mental, cultural, other different forms. And I don't know how to put it, maybe it's there, but I think there was something about the gap or the disconnection between the young and the adults, or intellectual and communities. I don't know how to put it, but I sensed, especially when Sarah was talking, that we didn't hear, or not hearing, or we failing to connect to the youth kind of ideas and activism, and I don't know how.
Yeah, it's beyond the intergenerational. It's actually
beyond
different generational perspectives, as they're different, from a sort of academic perspective to a community-based perspective, and those sort of.
And I would suggest agency, that people they make their own choices in terms of healing, or it should not be imposed on others.
Yeah, I think also in all of that sort of stuff, the idea that it's where power's there, but people resist all of the, it's not like all these things just happen to people. There's always an interaction. Complicity as well, actually, people talk about that. That's other things?
Maybe it's already there now. I just want to make sure that it is the global politics and global economics.
Yeah, global economics, yeah, I think it's a good point. It's not really on this. Other things?
And the other thing that I've really been struggling with a bit is that if we're really looking at psychosocial healing and peacebuilding, one of the key components of that is maybe linked with the morality studies, also the issues of accountability. So we hear the generals, they're dancing, they are better, but they still abuse people. So how does our healing facilitate the outcomes of peacebuilding? So for me, the psychosocial work in peacebuilding is not just about healing. It's healing with the means to an end, that we want to build peace. So to build peace, there has to be accountability, there has to be all these things. And I just follow, how do we live the better? It's not sufficient that you've been healed. If you've been a perpetrator, so we said we must deal with the victim and the perpetrator, but also we deal with the perpetrator and the perpetrator, so you get healed enough and have more insight to can go and say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop here. So the issues of accountability and where do they come in? and maybe even morality, and where do they intersect the issue of
So, as you're speaking accountability, I was also thinking of like non-repetition as well.
yes, they guarantees.
Yeah.
Just picking up on what I'm putting saying, my own sort of work triggers for me is something that I've picked up through these days is the struggle of articulating very complex situations and the way in which we slip into binaries that aren't real. So masculinity, femininity, peace, violence, they don't exist separately from each other. And how do we find ways of understanding that? The structural and the personal. You know, it just, as I think back over these days, I think all of us in different ways have done that. We try to polarize things that aren't polarized. There's something messier and more organic going on there. And where is the language for that? And where are the frameworks that help us to hold that? Because any one moment of capturing it immediately creates a false image because it's moved on in some way too. So something around that.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think it links with the language stuff, but you add into the, you know, I think even just thinking of that, even with those sort of words there, you know, like, we all think we know what cultural violence is, but like, really, it's just a way of trying to explain something that's really, really complicated, very different in different contexts, and we sort of don't really have the language. Yep.
I'm just thinking how we can capture this issue of reintegration of people into poverty, and it again becomes sort of, again.
Yeah.
I think that is powerful,
Yeah.
and it's important for us to cover that reflection for
Yeah.
sustainability of peace and healing.
I think in the DDR stuff, there's always a lot of talk about reintegrating into poverty, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, we were talking a lot about like healing into poverty.
Yeah.
You're like helping people with something, but still keeping them in the same place. Anything else? You could probably go on all day.
Something that struck me about the way Pomona was speaking was that she didn't talk about victims and perpetrators multiple times in her conversation. She spoke about victim perpetrators, bystander beneficiaries, all four of those. So we so often not always just victim perpetrators, but the fact that she's expanding that category and it fully touches on what Teresa is saying is more just. I think.
So multiple roles of people, and people talked about complex roles in different ways. I mean, there's the second last presentation, the role of women in different contexts and men in different contexts. You know, there are multiple identities and roles actually, I think. Maybe I'll just take like 2 more if they're burning, otherwise we'll keep going. It's really just to try and take us back into where we've come from as we move to the next. Yeah.
I don't know if the word dialogue is there, but maybe in...
Yeah. As one of the project types, or just
like
generally?
in 3 days, I think dialogue has been there, conversation, building narrative, bringing people together, bringing communities to tell their stories, sharing the experiences, listening to the people we're trying to tell. All that is done through dialogue. So, I thought it's a key word.
You know, I may have overemphasized this concept of analysis, but I'm absolutely convinced. I mean, we have to pay attention to the wisdom and our intuitions and so forth, but we're not doing, again, with the people, an analysis of the situation. We go off track.
And have any of you ever been into any of these workshops where people take notes by drawing pictures?
Yes.
Yeah, so I sort of think maybe that's what we need along also with all the different things. So, okay, that's great. I think it gets us back into that space, some of the issues talking about, some of the gaps. So now we're going to try and do the hard bit. And the hard bit is really to answer the questions of how these relate to each other. What can we practically do? And so the series of questions, which we're going to try and at least begin that process. I don't think we're going to finish that process. But what we wanted to do is at least try and leave with some direction that IJR in their wisdom can figure out with everybody how to take that forward in the war trauma group. I'm not sure. So these are the two questions that I wanted you to try and start with. And I think what we wanted to steer away from is long feedbacks on flip charts of lots of words. So rather something short and succinct that gives some sense of direction would be better than a whole lot of stuff. So the first question is, what is the nexus between peacebuilding and psychosocial care, and where and how should they intersect or overlap? And I've actually taken these questions from the outline that you got for the conference. I didn't make them up. They're actually what we said this conference was meant to be about. And so that's the first one. So I thought what we'd aim to do there is list a maximum of 2 intersections. So 2 areas where you think these 2 fields intersect. And then the second question is, how can psychosocial work influence and complement peacebuilding efforts and wider social change, and vice versa? So the task is one way that psychosocial work can influence or work with peacebuilding, and one way in which peacebuilding can work or influence psychosocial work. So the report backs to be quite focused. These are our 2 suggested intersections, and these are our two ways. And then we'll see if there's some sort of commonality amongst those. How does that sound? Yeah? Okay. So what we'll do is just stay in the tables, and then how much time have we got?
We have another hour.
Oh, we've got another hour. Okay. Cool. So let's, shall we take 30 minutes then at the tables to really try and get into it? Pick somebody who's going to report back. We don't want to hear the whole conversation, just the responses.
Our 2 intersections between psychosocial care and peacebuilding. One we had was that both fields, both areas seem to use a lot of the same methodologies to do the work, in doing both types of work, such as the use of narratives, theater, arts, and building social relationships. Secondly, both really emphasize and have a strong need for dialogue as a primary mode, and also a need for focusing on the group dynamics. What does psychosocial work bring to peacebuilding field? We had that the psychosocial field has a contribution in terms of really starting with an internal focus on understanding and healing ourselves first before doing the external work, or at least as we do the external work. And also we mentioned the high need for the capacity for self-regulation in doing peacebuilding work, and it's something that the psychosocial field kind of can really bring as an emphasis in terms of how to, strengthen our capacity for self-regulation. What does peacebuilding bring to the psychosocial work? In this one, we said that, especially in conflict and post-conflict areas, that psychosocial work cannot happen without the peacebuilding work. It really can't happen within a vacuum, and we had some examples of instances where psychosocial work was trying to take place in conflict or post-conflict areas without a real emphasis on the peacebuilding, and people really, still kind of having a very difficult time and still kind of staying stuck, and a lot of kind of ongoing kind of re-traumatization and stuff. So really needing to address the larger kind of political and systemic issues is something that the psychosocial field can really benefit from the peacebuilding field.
I
has to do with the fact that both psychosocial work and peace building ultimately has justice as a goal, as one of its end goals. They use different routes to get there, but that could be, and so if the peace builders, use the route in terms of harmonious societies, giving people voice and skill. Similarly, the psychosocial people should, through the healing process, also work towards agency, so that ultimately justice is the one thing where there's a connection. Secondly, we said that, and I'm choosing now because we have the range of things here, is the fact that both peace building and psychosocial practice actually wants a similar outcome, and they just use different routes to get there. For instance, peace building, asks for accountability, whereas psychosocial practice looks at the victim, it looks at the perpetrator, and those two together can actually, so that it's not the one or the other, but actually both. And then the contribution that psychosocial can make to peace building is that if the psychosocial needs are seen to, it contributes to a more stable society, and that's at the heart of peace building. Secondly, we said that peace building can help psychosocial practitioners to broaden their perspective of the person that they see, so that it's beyond the presenting problem, actually looking at the systemic issues that contribute.
I think in our initial spatial discussion, for some people of the group, just struggled even with some of the questions because peace building and psychosocial just were so integrated and couldn't see how that could not be linked. So it was quite hard to say, how can this influence this? Because, well, it just has to. It already does. But then challenged by other people who are working in different sectors and different spaces in terms of how, for some of us, we see some of this as common sense, or this is just the way, obviously this is the way it is, but actually recognizing from other disciplines and from other perspectives, it's not actually seen like that. So looking at how we can actually present that. So one of our intersecting spaces was specifically looking at the justice system and justice process. So linking how do we better link psychosocial issues, because recognizing that justice is part of that peace building, also that peace building wheel. How do we link in psychosocial better, both for lawyers, advocates to understand more around the psycho and social implications, but also for the support for victims and perpetrators within that space and within the justice system. Another aspect in terms of that peace is very important for peace building, I suppose it maybe links into the second point, that peace building to continue in places that are considered to be in peace. So even looking, say, Netherlands or other countries that we maybe not presenting or talking about, but recognizing the challenges, the complexities, also for asylum seekers and refugees in those spaces, that actually we have to engage with peace building and discussions and open dialogues in places of peace as well as those of conflict and so-called post-conflict. And then another intersecting space, I suppose, between peace building and psychosocial care is also, and it came up in one of the discussions, for also children, how do we share some of the past experiences or past experiences of violence? How do we share part of that experience without increasing vulnerability or exposure to spatial violence, but also making that as part of the story, part of our history, part of our story, part of that experience, finding ways in terms of how we communicate our issues of our past, our violence experiences, of freedom fighting, of different intergenerational traumas. How do we find ways to actually communicate that? Is there anything else?
Like other groups, we started off by saying that there is already a kind of nexus and that we should have definitely trauma-informed peace building and peace building informed by trauma work. And basically to say that everything that is done in the peace building field or in the psychosocial work should wear we should put on a lens, like in the peace building work, like a psychosocial lens, whatever we do and plan, and the other way around. But then one of the nexus we also focused on was really on the nexus between really justice and the psychosocial work, so to narrow it down a bit. And to really say that, justice system, similar to what was said here about victims' testimonies, how testimonies collected, so that there's often no intersect there where that there is psychosocial support needed for victims. And but then also to say that psychosocial methods and practices, there's a wide variety of things available, and that, for example, the issue of storytelling, that it's one method that's of course very useful, and we see many examples, but that's also not the only method that always helps, because it also has a high risk of re-traumatizing people, and that's something to also be considered again in the bigger transitional justice field, where, for example, methods like truth commissions and so on, they emphasize the issue of basically telling the story, telling the testimony, and then to also consider that the psychosocial support or other methods could be very useful instead. Yeah, I think that's kind of the key things.
So, we started off by saying, you can look at being at peace with yourself and peace with community and family. Again, leading to this individual and collective healing, both to be addressed. And actually what we quickly found is that we started sharing experiences from our work with the NGOs that we were working for, actually doing psychosocial work leading to peace building. You want to add something on that?
Yeah, no, exactly. Sorry, we are actually much more organized than we seem. It was the lunch. One of the things we discussed was about the different levels at which that nexus can be encouraged. I think part of what we're saying is that it doesn't exist, or it may exist in parts. It may exist because we are there in a room or in a series of rooms. I think what we discussed was about how these could be more generic thoughts of how to actually inform them into a landscape, into a country, at a policy level, so within and between ministries, and looking at the different types of ministries, of course, all the places in which this conversation should happen are quite a broad set of ministries. So you're talking about health, education, social services, culture, justice. Again, I haven't seen that approach, certainly not in South Sudan, and I would wonder why it hasn't happened, and of course this has really triggered me to think about that. And then, of course, it's one thing to have a policy discourse about that. It's another one to have those that are actually practically implementing different parts of this from their own professional perspectives. So that's another place where people have to come together and form a group, literally a nexus group that discusses these issues. And they may exist in some countries, but actually in South Sudan we have one on health, on mental health. We have another one on peace building, and I'm wondering now, why are they separate? And do people actually overlap? Do they jump from one group to the next? Why don't they come together? And of course, then the idea of practice feeding policy and policy coming back down. And I think that somehow those have to be linked, and they have to speak to each other and learn from, as we said earlier on, the failures and the successes. So I think that's another place where that nexus needs to happen. It sounds very generic, but maybe that's where we're at in some ways. Back to you.
Yeah, no, to add on that, colleague.
It's like reading the news.
So we found that to go back to this practice in the field, that using this trauma lens or this psychosocial lens to look at peace building, we found it very helpful as a practitioner in order to work on achieving transformation.
You wrote a lot.
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to?
The first one, we were really talking about how, and we were talking about it more in the shape of governance and not so much about peace building. We are really talking about when you think about having to rebuild institutions or build new institutions, right now the peace building and the governance world makes the assumption that rational thought and rational decision making can be done by countries and societies that have been in conflict for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. And that this may be actually a false assumption, and that these options for state building may actually sit on a faulty plane. And that actually the psychosocial and the trauma lens can actually provide a new way of looking at the development of institutions and governance.
Oh, there we go.
For the second one, we understood that whenever you're in peace building, we look at the two-level, it's called the two-level game. We have communities where leaders take positions because of what communities want them to do. So the two-level game. So obviously, the communities do influence the leaders. And we look at the positions that the communities are taking, it could be because of they're vengeful. Their interest is to avenge, is to put the other community in a much more difficult position. Same thing with the leaders. And psychosocial interventions help the communities to frame the disputes or the conflict in a different way. Because they then now they have a different interest and take a different position in peace building. And that's how we saw psychosocial interventions influencing peace building processes. Because it's all really about positions and interests at the two-level game.
Question, we really kept to the point and just listed two intersections. Two intersections we listed were community-based interventions and the goal, the aim, the well-being of the people. We concentrated mostly on the second question, and the person taking notes at that time drew a picture. So, I'm going to show, explain. Okay, so you may not see this, but what it is, it's an umbrella, okay? On the top you see rain. The umbrella represents, the body of the umbrella represents peace building. Because peace building as a field is all encompassing. It includes everything, think about it. It includes governance, politics, economics. I can't think of anything that's not related to peace building, okay? Now, the rain is the chaos, the war, the violence. Now, the point here represents psychosocial work. And the idea is that the psychosocial work can provide a lens by which we look through peace building. You see, we don't connect much of the peace building work to the psychosocial work, similar to what Angie just stated. But if psychosocial work could raise awareness of how it's all connected, and it really is. If you think about the politics, the governance, and these conflict areas. Now, here, the handle, now you think about how an umbrella works, you push it up. This represents individual and collective agency. So individuals can help through advocacy, raise awareness, through interventions. So this represents the power base back up. Hope that makes sense.
Maybe to add to this also, the individual collective agencies can provide the capacity building sort of institutions, and both local and traditional practitioners social support units in the villages where I come from, or yeah, that is it.
When we were discussing the questions, we got actually stuck at the overall questions, the two. We didn't even list the intersections and everything. We came up with like this summary that psychosocial work is an element of the broader peace-building work, and therefore also a form of peace-building in itself during conflict and in post-conflict situations. But at the same time emphasizing that psychosocial work is critical to address also the structural, social, political, systematic issues that you want to address all under peace-building work. And then, in brackets, also the other way around. So I think we just captured the questions, but then in an answer in a summary fashion.
Okay, thank you. That will be helpful for the report. Okay, well, thank you. I don't think I'm going to take much discussion on that unless there's any sort of burning something someone wants to say or feels that something wasn't said in their group that they wanted everyone to hear. And I think it is important to know that certainly in my discussions with the organisers that this is the beginning of the process rather than the end. So the idea is to gather this all together and put it into something. I don't know, we've got video, audio, I don't know what the something will be. But the next step that we would like you to take is, having heard all of that, having been through the discussions you've been through, having heard everything over the last 2.5 days, our question to you is, well, what are the next steps? What needs to happen? And we thought we'd leave it up to you in terms of how narrow or how broad you would like to take that. I mean, Barry had raised stuff about the collaboration issues. I've heard talk about a training package or kit. It might be more micro, where you might be saying, how do we connect somebody had mentioned however many groups there were here, how do we just connect the groups that are here? Perhaps it's a specific, someone had said that, a specific, I think it was you, Barry, like a specific project that people would work on. We'll leave it up to you. But our question to you is, what should be the next steps that we take? So there might be about this group, there might be about the issue. We'll leave it to you to see what you say, so that then the organisers can see how that can move into something.
This is going to be a much more organised presentation, you'll be glad to know, than the one before, because we're a very organised group. Let's make it very, very quick and short. So we were thinking that next steps would involve some kind of an energetic creation of a network. And we're talking of 2 levels. Of course, we have a global level and we have a national level. These things will generate an energy, I think, off the back of this very important conference, I think. So on the global level, we're talking of, obviously we want to create a conversation that keeps going, and we have very disparate paths across very broad geographies. So we want to maintain the geography, the network, excuse me. We feel there's a lot to be shared in terms of real content. And the examples that were given to us were so powerful that somehow if we can have some of that locked into a more central place, we felt that would be very, very useful. We felt that possibly there might be room for some kind of guidelines. I know that we all have horror generally of guidelines because of what they may or may not say, but we feel that there are others who might try and fill the space and who might end up writing nothing about something, and we would rather write something about this. I was going to say that. But obviously also we're thinking of an audit, something that we represent different constituencies in different countries, and to have as much information out of different countries would be incredibly useful. And to find a place you could centralize that and to make it available, readily available, we thought would be very, very useful. So that's the global level. And of course, we're speaking of very much the people who are in this room, and there are others, of course, there'll be many others who didn't make it, or others that we can think of now. At the national level, we're thinking of really along a similar vein. Again, there are many cases, I was thinking of South Sudan specifically, where we really don't know who's doing what. Probably because there are lots of people coming in, lots of people leaving, and we really need to be able to kind of identify more clearly, and this may apply to other countries, and I would suspect it does. But also forums. There are forums that are doing peace building, there are forums that are doing mental health, and then kind of do they not overlap? Do people move between them? or can we get them to overlap, or can we get them to actually lock into each other in some way? And again, the whole thing of, kind of, it's not just individuals in that room, but it's everything that comes underneath the resources, kind of the actual work they're doing, so they're mapping the who, the how, the where, and et cetera, within country. And then the last one is actually I've already spoken about. And so trying to pull that together into a very interactive website that represents these two spheres actually would then allow practitioners not necessarily to have to delve, because some people are saying, but I want to specialize in one particular aspect, I don't want all this clutter. But there are others who will be saying, no, but I need to see the broader picture. I need to be able to see what happens in Somalia or in Rwanda. And so I want to get the whole picture in Rwanda. And so it allows you to kind of engage at different levels. And it allows us to go into the kind of a whole sphere of lessons learned, failures, successes, the idea of databases and index of actors, resources, guidelines. So all of that would really be made available through that. And of course we said that IJR and Trauma Foundation would make great custodians of that. So thanks very much. Sorry, does my group, wherever they are, I can't see, you're scattered. Is that okay?
Yes. Can I ask one or two questions just to help?
Ingi, did you want to add something?
No.
No, sorry.
So just one or two questions just to help the War Trauma Foundation and IJR in their quest for building this. When you talk about the global, are you primarily thinking of a sort of starting with an African context? Because I mean, global is pretty big. So, and then all the examples you obviously gave were African. So, what were you thinking when you said that? Or maybe starting with Africa, and I don't know.
If I may, we discussed and we agreed that most of the stories which were here were mostly based on practice in Africa.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether it's actors from outside Africa but working in Africa. If we took the Africa geography, the experience may still inform the rest of the world. But if we take the geography of Africa, it doesn't matter whether the actors are external to the continent or not.
And then the second one was, I presume when you're talking about the website of resources, it's sort of starting more with what broadly might be defined as psychosocial. I mean, you wouldn't be making a website of every peace-building activity. It's more the psychosocial activities or not?
Maybe let me speak to that. I mean, I think that in country, because we have a number of actors who are working on these, and actually probably they've already mapped and done everything.
Yeah.
So it's not that suddenly IJR and War Trauma Foundation would have to go and start doing all of that. Yeah. I think those resources, those spaces, those lists are already there. And what I was saying was, in some cases it might help to stimulate that to happen. And I don't think it's something that should be the specific responsibility of those who are managing the website. It's just something that would help to infuse different countries to say, yeah, we need to do this. We haven't done it. Why not? Let's do it. And then it can be locked up. I mean, I think Peacebuilding, you're right, it could incorporate everything. It could then end up with DDR all the way through to social services. I'm not sure. I don't know what others feel.
Yeah, to add to that, for instance, there is this website mhpss.net. So there is this platform already with the items you were describing, on which we, for instance, could create a peace-building and psychosocial work group that could allow us to...
A very pressing two words. But the guidelines, for example, we said that the mental health people have guidelines. The peace-building have like the Bassioni Van Boven guidelines. We don't know how the two speak to each other. That can be a start point of looking at how that interact.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's great for us to have something to go on. I think that's excellent. So, group 2.
Can you clap for us?
Oh, yeah.
Way forward, we're just thinking some practical things from the conference that we would like. We would like the sharing of the PowerPoint presentations. If somehow we can share those, that would be great. A sharing of resources, reports, relevant information, some reports that will be associated with this, papers associated with the presentations, or anything you think would be helpful to our discussions. I've already asked some people for their resources. Also was suggested a mapping of organizations and skills. I think similar to what Ferdinand mentioned. Who's doing what, where? Who has what skills are needed where? Is someone doing that over there? Would you come over here?
Yes.
I think that would be great if we know who's where doing it well. A publishing a conference work, I think that may be underway, but it would be brilliant to get something from this group. Now, other points. A working group, loose network, we've met each other, we're like-minded, we got along. Wouldn't it be nice to stay in contact? Wouldn't it? Okay, so some sort of loose network. I just suggested friend each other on Facebook. Making this, you have to explain this because I get tangled in acronyms and I'm not sure what.
So we wanted
please.
to, like the first group, we wanted to make links between our group and our modality of thinking with the MHPSS reference group that oversees the global implementation of the IASC guidelines. And we think that that would be done through dialogue, participation in their meetings, and helping to find common ground. It would not be by imposition and ordering them to implement things in their guidelines. And then that would segue very naturally into this idea of forming a sub-site on the MHPSS website on peacebuilding, reconciliation, social transformation.
Okay, brilliant. Next, supporting research of ongoing program and projects. One of the issues that came up is that we need more evidence. We need more empirical work done on what we're doing. There are a lot of conversations about this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and thinking through, the impact of all of the work that we're doing. It's something that we can report on, that we could also easily absorb. Also spoke about the need to do small pilots in order to educate and inform donors, I argue not only donors but stakeholders, of the value of this work. Because I know many of us are engaging donors, but they don't really understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why it's important. But maybe we can do some small projects that would be set up for that explicit reason. Maybe that would be of help. That's that.
Okay, I think that's good. I don't have any specific questions.
I'm just wondering on that front, I mean, if we were to be very forward-moving with donors, is rather than waiting for that, which could take 6 to 12 months, normally that's kind of the span of getting together pilots and getting funding and all that thing, it is actually already taking the sum of this and having a certain group of individuals present this to, I don't know, either the development wings of governments, of some of the core governments that we think would respond to this, or would need to respond to this. I mean, just, it doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands of people in the conference, but at least to have a core number that would be able to tip the balance in our favor, would then get them to actually release funding for it. I mean, just let's say 20, 30 people, and just say this number of people actually produce this body of evidence. I think this is already evidence of something, and therefore we shouldn't underestimate what this represents, and then get the donors to start thinking about it, and say, on that note, we would like you to consider these projects.
And you pull out the donors who are already interested in thinking about this. What my experience with USAID in East Africa is, they're very open to this. They want to know what this really is. They're a little bit behind technically. They don't actually know exactly what it is they want, but in their hearts they feel this is the right thing. And once they get that, they will be very, very strong people to go and have dialogue with other donors. But we've got to find who are already the agents, who are interested in this, and sit down with them and talk to them about what this specifically looks like and how this can be done in a very concrete way, so that when they're starting those conversations with others, they're already saying about it what they know now. And right now, I think they're just kind of at this early stage of, oh, this is great, but I don't know what it is.
On psychosocial and peacebuilding, which we were involved in, which was supported by the IDRC. We have a network of researchers in Guatemala, Mozambique, Kashmir, Sri Lanka, so a number of other places globally who are looking at exactly the same issue. So we need to also find a way, I mean, Mike and I are part of that, so we're a little bit of the glue, but we also need to find a way of connecting those two networks in those type of forums, because I know a lot of those individuals have been doing this type of lobbying work in different places. So there's something we can talk about afterwards about how to connect those two networks as well. Right, so thank you.
Members, Elano, Shelly, Angela, Yoke, Elisa, Lucretia, and Ama. So those are the members, and just to say we really enjoyed working with each other. Shelly wanted to start another focus group just with us. And I was instructed by the group to convey a message to the conference organizers that this conference has been a big appetizer and we need more. So to really thank you for that. There is two things already that has been addressed by other groups, so I'm not going to touch on those two, which is I'm not going to touch on it, so I'm saying, I want to say it. So the first thing that we talked about was really to use this opportunity to continue facilitating learning exchange between ourselves. We thought that the presentations here were just appetizers, and we wanted to know more about what are other people doing, using that information where we really present our work in a meaningful and in-depth way, to also have exchange visits. We thought that what we have here is not a true representation of South Africa, and if some of the delegates here think that, you know, this is South Africa, it isn't. So how can we, wherever we go and show people the realities of their country, where the workshop is at, or the conference is at, sharing methodologies of how we work, media publications that we might already have in our different organizations to begin to share that. What we also liked in this meeting is the connection between the practitioners and researchers and the academics, and we really feel that is what is going to strengthen the field. So to continue strengthening those relationships, but also to just use this as an opportunity not only to share our work, but to find ways of strengthening our work, to find what are some of the tools that we could use to improve the work that we do. The other one, of course, is that we want another meeting. Other people shared this, where there is more in-depth focus groups. There was a suggestion that even from here we can identify focus groups that can continue to connect with each other before the meeting comes and share different ideas and things that we are interested in. And of course, when we do the visit, have the field, when we have the conference, have the field visit, and they've also mentioned having donors coming in. We also really felt very strong that we need to pull them in a bit more. The other big thing was that we have to see how this platform can start developing and building on a body of knowledge around issues of peace building and psychosocial interventions. Guidelines, we already talked about them. We also thought we needed to do that. But also just developing theoretical understanding around peace building and psychosocial work that are grounded in practice, and that's really important, and underlying that we inform the theory based on practice and making sure that it is contextual and speaking to our realities. You all know, I mean, okay, I know as a practitioner in Africa how sometimes I struggle with theories that have been created that don't speak to my reality. And then just to encourage, especially us as practitioners, because we're so busy writing, to pair up with the practitioners, with the academics and researchers, to write up more about our work. And I think intervention is a very good journal that we can start writing in, because it does encourage the writing in the field and field work. Then the scoping we also talked about, so I'm not going to touch on that. The final one, I've been talking about this throughout the conference, but it emerged in a group, and we had some really interesting and honest discussion about what does privilege mean, how do we deal with it, how do we become our own laboratory, how do we reflect on ourselves. If we come from the West, and we agree that we shouldn't have this clear division between the West and the North, but if you come from the West and you're privileged and you're working in Africa, how do you deal with that and what you represent? If in South Africa I represent the middle class and those in privilege and in power, and I work with communities that see themselves as being marginalized, how do I engage with those things? And that for us to really do this work, we need to have a conference that enable us to engage in those messy and uncomfortable spaces, because when we really solve how to work together, we help society also to do the same. So yeah, that's what we say.
This is really great that a lot of ours have already been said. I think it seems like people, we're all really on the same page as far as the excitement and goals and visions and things coming out of this. So that's really neat. So like others, our group also was really interested in having this kind of like online directory network kind of thing. We tried to list out some specific things that we thought would be helpful in there. So kind of if it could include like an overview, mission, values of the organization, specific areas of expertise that we could reference, specific projects, again, that like was mentioned, the skills, resources, and supports that the organization may specifically be able to offer to others in the network, and also identification of the specific needs or gaps for collaboration that would be helpful. And then contact information and maybe some profiles of the key contacts or something to, again, kind of continue kind of the personal relationships and face behind our network. We also said that yes, there needs to be a source of coordination for updating and housing of this, and we also agreed that we thought that that IJR and the War Trauma Foundation would be a good place for that. We also agreed that looking at intervention as a place to really kind of to encourage all of us in this network to try and do maybe continued publication and sharing of our work in something like intervention. We liked the idea of maybe having some kind of collaboration or work group that could really work on some kind of toolkit that could come out of this specifically for kind of these two areas, the kind of trauma-informed peace-building side and also the integrating peace-building into the trauma healing side. So if there are like specific tools or strategies that could be identified that could be kind of included in this toolkit, it might be a neat thing that could come out of this. We agreed also about the exchange visits, and we thought that, you know, that those might not be like big funded things, but for any of us that may be in anyone else's country or place of work, that we could easily maybe contact each other and welcome each other and you know, show our area and our work there in person. The last one was also, I think, mentioned a bit, but this idea about trying to have some kind of maybe like initial kind of pilot projects that are identified. We talked about trying to identify kind of a criteria for best practices related to integration of peace building and psychosocial supports. Like, so what would be the criteria for projects that are really integrating those? And then maybe look, you know, if there were funding for something like this, could there be a few that are chosen? These could be either existing projects that some here might already be working on, or new projects that get developed. And really looking at the benefit of that being kind of the assessment, the evaluation, and also the documentation and feedback for those projects. So looking at kind of having some kind of unified standard kind of evaluation methods so that we could start to create some evidence around this, and also so that the projects could have some external feedback to kind of continue to think about how to conceptualize their work in this kind of newly emerging field, maybe, or something. That's it. Okay.
So I think we mentioned also with our group, but we had a little bit of some creative suggestions to go with those also. So we'll have to answer.
Not the same.
First of all, on this chart there's nothing much, just say a blog, but we said there's need for some online presence, which needs to be kept alive and can be molded over time and maybe grow into a website. And then the second thing we discussed was the idea of continued workshops and trainings which are complementary amongst ourselves.
for people in peace building, by people in peace building to those in psychosocial support and vice versa. And maybe it can be done regionally to reduce costs, or in-country, or online seminars. And these trainings must also be at an experiential level, not just the academic trainings. And the third one was that there needs to be a skills audit and database to identify skills and expertise, and sort of do an organizational profiling and a database. The question there was who is going to do that, and I keep hearing the IGR and World Trauma Foundation. And then the fourth one was there is a need for an online resource and tools base. I think this came out in the last group, which we suggest that there's a building of a resource base out of experiential and academic literature, a mix of field reports, project reports, experiential knowledge, and not necessarily, we stress that not necessarily evidence-based or academically proven, but something that informs others on the day-to-day happenings in the field. And then fifth, we had care for caregivers. I think we're the first group to suggest that. We agreed that this was a very important thing that should be encouraged or almost compulsory with all groups. And that one point we made was that healing the healer is an important thing that should be actually added to budgets in organizations working with in peace building and psychosocial support. And also that we need to educate our donors about that so that they are aware that it's a line that is important. And then 6 was also on collaborative publications. That's to include multimedia publications. And we also, on the 7th, that there's some needs of some peer feedback and support. Not necessarily critiquing, but giving each other feedback on the learnings, what works, what doesn't work, so that we build a culture of challenging each other to improve, and also to give each other feedback on how our work affects us in terms of psychologically and socially. And finally, we propose that there be some advocacy work of and about the work in the Nexus that we've identified in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. As we see where the different groups are all connecting, so I'm going to suggest, or just leave it there, that someone is going to try and put all of that together. So from my side, I know this came at the end, but you've all worked very hard, and thanks for that. And I think we've got some direction of travel. So thank you, and I don't know, do I hand over to yourself?
Thank you all. I just want to have some final words before we are all leaving. Let me stay with the way forward. I noticed that some of you might think that World Trauma Foundation is a very rich organization. Maybe it's because foundation, but it isn't. We are an extremely poor, small organization. But the name is anyhow problematic. If you look at the abbreviation for World Trauma Foundation, it's also not so nice. But okay, that's something else. That's the gloomy part, but I have something positive, that the donor who financed this meeting is quite enthusiastic and already more or less let us know that if you come up with good ideas, that there is we are very sure that we have further funding. So that's nice. Yes. And this gives us a lot of energy to go on. Frederik and I will start with a report, but we don't want to do it ourselves. We want to make it a kind of joint effort, so we will send our draft to you and ask you to add or change or whatever. The intention is that all contributions will be added to the report, but also will come on the website. And I think we will ask you if it is okay, if it is on the website, so the written part and the PowerPoint to go home. And you hate that moment at the time because you don't want to leave, and you've met amazing people and had fun with the music and everything. And only much later do you realize that that's actually the best time to leave, when you're having most fun. And that's where I feel I'm at the moment. I'm also very sad you're all leaving. I won't say very much because I think everything has been said. I just want to thank you all, our
intellectual elders who have guided us, who've made time out of their busy schedules to be here with us. You know who you are. And our foot soldiers who are inspiring us by being out in the field and sharing the stories and bringing some of the victims and some of the lived experiences into this room. And I won't say very much more, except that the quote that I chose for this conference, quite randomly, by Arthur Golden of Memoirs of a Geisha, is, "After all, when a stone is dropped into a pond, the water continues quivering even after the stone has sunk to the bottom." I'd like to think that we dropped a stone, maybe a few, and maybe quite a big one, and the water is rippling. And I hope that it will continue to ripple for a while. I wish you all a safe journey home. This is the beginning of a long journey, and I'm excited to be honored with all of you. So thank you.